Hello everyone, I'm Dan the Cineman and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about Steven Spielberg's Disclosure Day. I've literally just got out of a screening for this film on release night. It's the 10th of June. That's the release night here in the UK. And yeah, I'll give you my spoiler-free thoughts first and then my spoiler-full thoughts in the second half of the video. Don't worry, there will be spoiler warnings and I'll chapter the video so you don't accidentally get some spoilers. Brief synopsis about Disclosure Day. It's a film about lies, it's a film about secrets, it's a film about giving the public the truth, and as you will have seen from the trailers, there are aliens involved somewhat. As you can probably tell by my voice, I'm laughing a bit. I'm really excited to get into talking about this film, and there's a lot to talk about. I think this is going to be a very, very divisive and polarising film. I think possibly the most of the year. I think some people are going to love this, some people are going to hate this. I'm sure you can already tell which camp I'm in. But before we go into it, I'll just do my usual disclaimer that I will use some images throughout this video. I will give credit where credit is due. If credit is not given, the images was found in the public domain, so no credit was needed to be given. Steven Spielberg's Disclosure Day. I'm just going to jump out and say it. In my opinion, it's the film of the year so far. I absolutely loved it. Like I just touched on, it's already got mixed reviews. I think it's going to continue to just get more and more polarising with the general public as more and more people see it. I feel like the subject matter of aliens, if I can think of the last few films that have come out, such as, Jordan Peele's Nope, you had Asteroid City, which I absolutely loved, but that didn't get great reviews. These are films that, involve aliens, and they always seem to get polarising reviews. This is one of them, but yeah, boy, I absolutely love this. If you're sort of a follower of sort of film reviewers somewhat, you'll know of Seth's film reviews, and you've probably seen his review of this film, and in that he says that this feels like a proper movie, and it definitely does. It's the Spielberg classic blockbuster with the big names, Emily Blunt, who is fantastic in this, Josh O'Connor, Coleman Domingo, Colin Firth. It's got these big names. It just feels like an event. It really feels like the sort of starter to Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, which was fitting because we had a trailer for that in my screening. I feel like we were all geared up. We've all been geared up for about a year now since we heard of the announcement of The Odyssey, but this is just sort of being served up in the meantime, and yeah, boy, it delivered. I just touched on the performances. Emily Blunt is obviously the lead, and you've got Josh O'Connell as well, and they're both brilliant. You've got Coleman Domingo supporting, Colin Firth is the antagonist. You've got Eve Hewson, who plays a love interest who I actually am unfamiliar with, but she was great here as Jane. You also had Wyatt Russell, who plays actually a very accurate toxic boyfriend. Maybe not toxic, but excuse my French, prick of a boyfriend. I didn't really know that a Spielberg film had that sort of writing in its locker, but I just thought that he was nailed as just a shitty boyfriend. But yeah, the performances are great. They really carry this film throughout, especially with the subject matter. I don't want to spoil anything, but it's sort of reliant on, especially in certain exposition moments, where we're a bit confused, we're relying on the performances to pull through and explain things to us, but also in a visual way to not hold our hand entirely. And yeah, it's definitely done here with these performances. It looks great, it's shot really nicely. The cinematographer is, sorry if I'm butchering this, not that he's going to listen to this video, Janusz Kaminski. I thought it looked really nice. Spielberg has somehow inherited the Warner gene. I'm pretty familiar with his films. I feel like he's one of those directors that makes films that you see as a kid that I haven't got the chance to rewatch, like Jurassic Park and Jaws, but I know I love those films. I don't remember there being, like tracking shots, like longer one-ers in them. He's got loads in this film, and oh my god, if you know me, you know that I love this, like, cinema, filming technique, and it's great. There's one that involves a car that's very similar to the famous one that I love in Children of Men, which is one of my all-time favourite films. It just works really well here. It gets you engrossed and really, locked in on what's going on. And I'll put a screenshot of my letterbox review. I won't read it because it's just basically what I'm saying here, but I've changed the background to what is probably my favourite shot of the film, which is loads of people outside the news station, and they've all got their camera flashes on. It just looks great, and the whole film looks great. I do really want to get into specifics about Disclosure Day because there's so much going on in the plot to talk about, but obviously I won't here. If you have seen the film, please do continue to the spoiler full section, or if you haven't seen it yet, when you go and see it, please come back and visit the spoiler full section because I will be talking about the plot in specifics. But I mentioned before about hand holding, and it did feel like Spielberg was sort of carrying the torch for not holding the viewer's hand. You know, we've been hearing so much about this sort of Netflixification of catering to viewers who are half watching Netflix whilst being on their phone. Cough, cough, Stranger Things season 5. But it really felt like that wasn't the case here at all. You know, I was a bit confused as to what's going on, and that's fine. You know, it really feels like Spielberg is saying it's okay to be confused. You know, you'll get there eventually. Even if not, you know, David Lynch is one of the best directors of all time. None of his films that I've seen make sense. I've only seen one, but, you know, that didn't really make sense, Blue Velvet, and I know his others are supposed to be, you know, just crazy. There was one part, I'll be honest, that I was a little bit like, that didn't need to be elaborated on. Again, I'll talk about that in the spoiler full section, but yeah, it was quite refreshing to not feel like we were being guided exactly through what was going on the whole time. I enjoyed the themes that this touched upon. You know, it explores existentialism, it explores religion, it explores sort of government secrecy and sort of deep state intelligence, you know, the society not being told the whole truth, which is quite topical in this point in time. You know, it really drew parallels to things like the Epstein files being released and no one really seemed to, you know, bat an eyelid. Those sort of lines this crosses, and it was really interesting to see that portrayed, you know, in a blockbuster. It's definitely not perfect. Apart from the divisive subject matter, I do think people just don't like it for fair enough reasons. The CGI actually isn't great. From someone like Steven Spielberg, I thought at times the CGI wasn't the best. At times it looked quite good, I thought. Other times it didn't look the best. I've seen people say that it's disjointed, which again I understand. And it's just a lot. Like, this movie is a lot. I feel like it hits a lot of notes. Some better than others, but just what it did well really clicked with me. And yeah, I'm left, like, honestly, this is what I love about movies and why I made this video, this channel. I just want to talk about this film. You know, I'm left genuinely feeling good, feeling happy, like watching a good film, you know, leaves you feeling. I thought on the whole the action scenes were great. You know, it's a Spielberg film. We're going to get these big moments, these heavy-hitting moments. And I did think the action scenes were good, even if, like I just said, the CGI in them sometimes wasn't the best. And they were accentuated by brilliant John Williams. If for some reason you live under a rock and that name doesn't ring a bell, he scored the Star Wars prequel trilogy with genuinely two of the best pieces of movie music I've ever heard in Across the Stars and Duel of the Fates. And yeah, he's doing his thing again here. I can't wait to listen to the soundtrack in full. I also can't wait to rewatch this movie. I just loved it. And there's so much going on, like I said. It's the kind of movie that you'll just pick more things up on the rewatch. And yeah, I just can't wait to see it again. To wrap up my spoiler-free thoughts on Steven Spielberg's 2026 movie, Disclosure Day, I loved it. I would recommend going to see this. You know, it's, again, these big directors, Spielberg, Nolan, Villeneuve, you know, later in the year, these are event directors. You've got to go and see this film because everyone's going to be talking about it. And especially with this film, I do think it's going to be really divisive. You know, films like this make for great office conversation. They make for great pub conversation, you know, just sort of informal chat with your friends. This is what great films do, you know. It just gets you talking, and like I am here. I'd love for you to come back and go for the spoiler full section as well, just to hear what I think about some specifics and just sort of see if you picked up on the same things as me. But yeah, it's definitely not for everyone, but go and see if this is for you, because I think it just might be. Okay, spoiler full time. God, we have a lot to talk about. If you haven't seen this film, please stop watching now, because I am going to get very spoilery here. If you have seen the film, you know that we've got a lot to talk about, because that was an absolute roller coaster. So let's get on to it. I feel like right from the very start, we're thrown into just not knowing what's going on. It reminds me of a Brandon Sanderson book in the way that he throws you head first into this world building. And for the first few chapters, hell, the first half of the book, you've got no idea what's going on with these words, these phrases. And this was the exact thing we saw here when Josh O'Connor's character gets out of the first stadium and, that first meeting with Colin Firth. All these words and these machines are thrown around that means nothing to us at the start, but as the film goes on, it means more and more to us. That's what I mean in terms of there's not a lot of hand-holding here. We're left to put two and two together ourselves for the most part. There is some exposition, but for the most part I feel like we're left to figure things out for ourselves, and that's really rewarding here. I referenced before one part that did sort of annoy me and that was a bit hand-holdy, and it was when we see the experience that Emily Blunt had when she was led by the aliens to the ship. But obviously they're in the form of the animals. Now, I'm not saying that I'm this super media literate guy, but I was able to pick up pretty quickly that the animals were the aliens. They were just in animal form, to not spook a child. And then I thought this point was hammered home with a really nice bit of visual storytelling. It's when the child of Emily Blunt's character is walking to the UFO, which is disguised as a house, with the aliens that are disguised as the animals. There's footprints in the snow, and they're alien footprints, and I thought that hammered home the fact that these are the aliens just in animal form. But then Coleman Domingo's character says and explains this, and that made me roll my eyes a bit. That was a little bit like Steven Spielberg wasn't trusting his audience to piece that together, which was a little bit frustrating. But the rest of the movie, I appreciate that we were left to piece this puzzle together ourselves. I really enjoyed the whole, secrecy bit and the whole exposing the truth to the wider public. Like I said earlier, it really felt like topical, and it felt a little bit like, sinister in that if this were to happen in the real world, something like this would never actually be able to get leaked. And then when it does get leaked in the film, oh my God, that last 20 to 30 minutes when it's breaking onto the news and we're seeing, the whole world react to this news. Oh my God, my eyes were glued to the screen and my bum was glued to the seat. The ending was reminiscent of Yorgos Lanthimos' Begonia, I thought. I won't spoil the ending of that film, but if you do know it, you know what I mean here, in that we see the whole world react to this news as we're sort of, seeing it for ourselves. This was just great, and it was sort of really rewarding that this whole film led up to, the release of this news and the sort of, it grappled with the consequences of it. I really enjoyed Jane's character and Jane's subplot, as she grapples with her religion, her existentialism. She sort of personified the whole plot of the film for me, in that should this, is it up to Josh O'Connor's character to release this to the world? Should he, is he obliged to? And then we sort of come to the decision that he is, and we see the fallout of that in this last 20 minutes. Yeah, just brilliant. What a great ending. The very last word of this film being listen was a great bookend and summary of a heavy theme that this film explores, which is empathy and its importance. We see Emily Blunt's character with these amazing abilities to look at someone and then, just know their whole life and give them advice based on what she sees. But this is just what, good listeners do. Often we should, we don't give the unfiltered advice to our friends and loved ones that they should hear because we don't want to upset them. We don't have the empathy in that way. Emily Blunt's character does here. These aliens have empathy that, they sort of prove that the world is lacking and they want to give back to the world. Obviously, a recurring theme, a recurring environment in this film is the news and sort of news centres and news anchors. And it's a really clever writing sort of mechanism where every time we see or we're in a newsroom, there's always talk of a war. And this ramps up towards the end. And, Emily Blunt's sort of revelation of the aliens is literally interrupting footage that people are saying is World War III. This was a great sort of parallel to the theme of empathy, and that, this is more important than war. And, we can put our differences aside to appreciate that something mental and magical is happening on our planet. I really enjoyed that aspect of this film. The aliens themselves, oh my god, I would die for those guys. I was locked in. That video of Colin Firth's character torturing that alien, I can't tell you. As much as I want to rewatch that film, I can't bear to hear that noise again. I would die for that little guy. Speaking of Colin Firth's character, again, I recognise this film isn't without its downsides, and one of them for me, low key, was his motivation to just stop caring. You know, right at the end, as Emily Blunt's giving her big sort of speech and releasing the news, he gets there and then he just sits down, and I kind of get it. You know, because he's seen this alien can show his wife, and he understands how capable of empathy they are and how much of that he lacks in himself. Maybe that was a little bit unexplained, and that's a major point of the film. You know, he could have stopped her right there, and he didn't. And I got it again, but I can understand why people would be annoyed at that. I appreciate how this film just feels big. You know, it feels like a blockbuster. The topics that it deals with feel very important, you know, corruption and asymmetry of information, stuff like that. It was just, yeah, great to watch. I like I said, I will definitely rewatch this, which is one of the biggest compliments to a film I could give. I do appreciate that it's not flawless, but like I said, what it does well really worked for me. And yeah, if you're here, you've seen the film, so let me know what you thought in the comments, whether you agree with me, disagree with me. I think there's going to be a lot of that over, you know, the coming discourse of this film. Like I said, it was so divisive. I loved it. The next man probably won't. You might not. You might. You know, I don't think there's going to be an in-between here. I think it's like a Marmite, love or hate. So let me know what camp you're in. In terms of my next video, I've seen that Cineworld, or well, cinemas probably, are doing a 4K restoration of Boogie Nights next week. Now, I watched that film for the first time a few weeks ago and absolutely loved it. I'm a huge PTA fan, so I will probably go and give that a watch. And I know that another one of my videos that was a review of an older film, Full Metal Jacket, has actually got quite a few views. So I'm not sure if people like the older film reviews, but yeah, I'll probably check that out and then review it. But until then, I've been Dan the Cineman. I hope you enjoyed this review. Please go and check this film out, or if you're here, you've already seen it, so let me know what you thought. And yeah, I'll see you at the movies.